Welcome to our discussion of stages of mourning. We know that throughout the Tisha B'Av period, there are different stages of mourning. I'd like to sort of outline all of them and see that it's more stages than you think there are. Let's take a look. The reason that we have to have stages is because Avelus Yishana. We're trying to mourn for something that's from 2,000 years ago. When you mourn for something 2,000 years ago, you have to get ready for it. You have to work yourself up to it. So whereas when someone dies, God forbid, as Rabbi Sphard-Beth explains, someone dies, they start with shock, denial, and therefore the very severe element of mourning starts right away. And then slowly they get out of it, they come out of their mourning, and the laws become less severe as time goes on, as they go to the year of mourning, let's say for a parent. However, when it comes to us for Avelus Yeshana, for something that's so old, you have to work up to it rather than work down from it. Let's take a look at the stages. Okay. I'm just going to use the sheet here as a guide for our discussion. Stages of mourning for the temple. So firstly, we have year-round. The lowest level of mourning is the year-round mourning. What do we have to do? The Gemara in Bava Basra says that when the temple was first destroyed, people thought maybe we shouldn't eat any meat or wine because there's no meat on the altar, there's no wine on the altar, so how can we have meat and wine? The rabbi said, nah, just leave a space on your wall that's not plastered. You used to have stone walls that would plaster it. Leave a space that's not plastered. It's good enough. Some people still do that. Some people say you should still do it. Some people say that it's too extreme. We have different customs. We break a glass at a wedding. We say Shir Hamalos. We say, some people say Al Nar's Bavel. Like during benching, we acknowledge the destruction. We do these small things year round. That's the lowest level. That's the base level. Then we have the 4 fasts throughout the clock as the year goes round and round. We are always confronting the build-up to Tisha B'Av, the fact that the city was under siege. A year that was the winter that started with Tevet, 10th of Tevet. Then a year and a half later, the Shabbat of Tammuz was the 17th of Tammuz. The walls were destroyed. Talk about that. We fast for that. Then the temple was destroyed. We fast for that. Then Gedaliah was killed. They didn't even have a governor, a leader from Israel. We lost that. So the 4 fasts are also part of the year-round consciousness of temple and its destruction. And we build up to Tisha B'Av through these 4 fasts that point toward Tisha B'Av, although Tzom Gedaliah was actually after Tisha B'Av. The 4th fast took place after Tisha B'Av, but it's part of the build-up, is building up to Tisha B'Av and then beyond. Then, of course, we have the laws of the 3 weeks. And during the 3 weeks, if we follow Rabbi Sphard-Beth's model, that there should be total parallelism between the mourning of the old and the mourning for, God forbid, fresh mourning for someone who dies, the 3 weeks should parallel the 12 months for a parent. The 12 months for a parent, what do? God forbid, Lo Aleinu, we should know from it. We don't go to weddings. So there are no weddings during the 3 weeks for Ashkenazim. We don't, what else don't we do? We don't listen to wild music. We don't gather with a lot of friends. According to Rabbi Sphard-Beth, you shouldn't gather with a lot of friends during the 3 weeks. According to the simple interpretation, we just don't take haircuts. Now, what about haircuts? People don't take haircuts for 12 months. So some say, no, you should take a haircut, but each time you take a haircut, you have to wait till the next time you look disgusting. Or you can shave every other day. You have to look disgusting first, build up a growth, and then you can shave. Even during the 12 months. So maybe that's what you do during the 3 weeks. You can shave when it doesn't look so good. But like if it looked like me, you should shave ready during the 3 weeks. But then you have the 9 days. 9 days should be parallel to the 30 days. In the 30 days, we don't shave at all. We don't take any haircuts. And in the 30 days, we don't do laundry. So we don't do laundry for 9 days. This is Ashkenazi custom. And during the shloshim, the 30 days, we don't bathe in the regular way. We don't go swimming. We don't take pleasurable showers. So too, during the 9 days, we take a cold shower, we take a lukewarm shower. take a partial shower. We never put our whole body under hot water, partial body under lukewarm water. So it's different. Now, there is one practice here that does not fit. We don't have meter wine during the 9 days. Why? It's not because that's one of the practices of mourning. It doesn't fit. This is supposed to correspond to the shloshim, the 30 days. We don't have meter wine. Meter wine is supposed to correspond to the worst period, right? When someone dies, that's when you don't have meter wine. Between the death and the funeral, you can't have meter wine. The 9 days is not the death. 9 days is parallel to the 30 days of mourning for a loved one. So why don't we have meat and wine? Soloveitchik says, it's a fulfillment of the idea we have less simcha. How do we have less simcha? Our custom is we don't have meat or wine. The Aruch HaShulchan and other people say that we don't have meat or wine during the 9 days, like the Gemara in Bava Basra. And how can we have meat or wine? The temple was destroyed. Okay. Then there's the week Tisha B'Av falls in. See, the 9 days are not mentioned in the Talmud. All the Talmud says is that when the month of Av comes, you have less simcha. So we express that by not having meat or wine. But the week of Tisha B'Av, there the Gemara itself says no laundry, no bathing. So Saper Chabes, just like the 30 days of mourning. So the week of Tisha B'Av is more serious. That's real avilus. The week before that is just miyut simcha, just less simcha. It's not avilus, it's not mourning. Now this year it's confusion. Is there a week when Tisha B'Av falls? This year Tisha B'Av falls on Sunday. So does Tisha B'Av really fall in a week? We're not going to mourn after Tisha B'Av, although there is such an opinion in the Talmud. Or if Tisha B'Av fell on Shabbos, then is that the week of Tisha B'Av, or the week of Tisha B'Av is the day after, because Tisha B'Av is postponed to Sunday. Big debate about that. So this year, there isn't really a week of Tisha B'Av. For Sphard-Beth, this is the only time when they don't do laundry. Just following the Talmudic law, the week of Tisha B'Av, that's when they don't do laundry or bathe in a normal way. Erev Tisha B'Av. Now, if we've been getting more and more serious, I'd like to suggest that Erev Tisha B'Av is actually like the death itself. What do I mean? Erev Tisha B'Av, the last meal before Tisha B'Av, you're not allowed to even gather with friends. You have to sit on the floor. It doesn't say on Tisha B'Av you have to sit on the floor, but it says at the meal before Tisha B'Av you have to sit on the floor. So it seems, and Rambam said it should be like the dead person sitting right in front of you. You should make some muzal fun. If you're really able to conjure this up, if you're really Talmud Chacham, if you really get the problem of Jewish history that there's no temple today, then during that last meal you would be sitting on the floor as if, God forbid, someone's loved one just died. So that's the most severe period. And I know we're going a little bit out of order. We haven't had the Shiva yet. The Shiva is Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av itself is like Shiva. There's a difference. The night is like the first 3 days of Shiva, where the rabbis say you should cry. The first 3 days of Shiva are for crying. It's not mitzvah to cry, but those days are designated for crying. So do at night. We quote the verse in Eicha Lamentations that you should surely cry at night. At night, the voice is heard. People get sad, depressed. Night is a time for crying. That's why we read the Lamentations, at the book of Lamentations at night. So the night of Tisha B'Av is particularly mournful. But it's not as severe as Erev, right before Tisha B'Av. That's even more serious. Now this year, Erev Tisha B'Av falls on Shabbos. And there's a debate. Is some of the Erev Tisha B'Av still there? Or the Gemara seems to say no. The Gemara says you could have a beautiful meal like Solomon in his heyday. Yeah, that's how beautiful your meal could be. Even Rishal Shudas right before Tisha B'Av. So on the one hand, the Talmud says that. On the other hand, some rabbis say, well, maybe you shouldn't learn Torah. Maybe you shouldn't invite anybody for Shal Shudas. Maybe you shouldn't sing songs at Shal Shudas. So there's a whole debate. But generally, Erev Tisha B'Av, very serious. Night of Tisha B'Av, crying. Day of Tisha B'Av, the morning of Tisha B'Av is not like the night when you cry, but it's also dedicated to a whole morning of focusing on the morning. We're not supposed to do anything else. We just say kinos. And the kinos, we this lament, that lament, and the other. It's a morning of mourning. It's a M-O-R-N to M-O-U-R-N. It's a morning where the whole focus is mourning, not crying like the night before, but yes, mourning. Now, the afternoon, however, we turn to some consolation. Now, you can't have Shiva without consolation. If somebody says, look, I'm having a COVID Shiva, nobody's going to come. Maybe on the Zoom. You say, well, you could still follow the laws of Shiva. You could sit on a chair, on the floor. You could cover your mirrors. You could take off your shoes. So you could never leave the house. You're having Shiva. But if nobody comes, you're missing an important element of the Shiva, namely the comfort. So some say that in the afternoon, we allow ourselves to be comforted. We say, Nachem, God should comfort the Jewish people. And the Haftorah is a little more broad. Tshuva, the Haftorah is a little more like a regular fast day. The afternoon of Tisha B'Av might be a little less severe. It's expressed by the custom today. We have a custom where we do sit on the floor at night and in the morning. In the afternoon, we get up from the chair. Everything else applies throughout the day. Those two things of sitting on the floor and sitting on the floor, that does not apply after the noontime. Also, tefillin. We don't wear tefillin. In the morning, we wear tefillin in the afternoon. Somehow, the morning is more like the first day of the Shiva, where there's no tefillin. And the afternoon is more like the latter days of Shiva, when there is tefillin. So again, what are we pointing out? That every stage is a little bit different. Even the day of Tisha B'Av itself has a different character. Now, according to the Talmudic law, the whole day is sort of the same, but according to customs, the day has different elements. Now, so you say, okay, we went from 3 weeks being like the 12 months, the 9 days being like 30 days, the meal before Tisha B'Av being like the death itself, and the Tisha B'Av being like the Shiva. So you say, okay, we're done. We did the Shiva, we did everything. We went through the whole cycle. Well, we don't stop. The night and the day after Tisha B'Av, according to the Ashkenazim, just until noon, the night and the day after Tisha B'Av is also like the 9 days. No laundry. Why? You can't shave and bathe. Why? Because the temple was actually burned, not on the 9th of Av, but on the 10th of Av. So this year, it's on Monday till noon, we still cannot do a lot of things. So it's interesting that it kind of wanes away. It doesn't end like abruptly. It wanes. After Tisha B'Av, we go back to the Shloshim rules, the rules of the 30 days. It's interesting to note that there was an opinion in the Talmud, in the Gemara Tainis, that the week after Tisha B'Av should also be, the days after Tisha B'Av till Shabbos should also be a time of mourning, where no laundry or bathing should be done. We don't agree with that. And there was another opinion that the whole month, it's a month of sadness. It's a whole month of sadness. And should I cry in the 5th month? The whole idea of Tisha B'Av is that it's in that month. The exact day is not as important. The months are very important when it comes to these 4 fasts. It's the month that's very important. So there's a suggestion that the whole month should be sad. We like to say that no. After Tisha B'Av, we turn to another theme of nechama, of consolation, just like Shabbos Nachamu. And we're turning to a whole new element. We mentioned that on Tisha B'Av, it's hard to get any consolation at all. And that's why Rabbi Moshe Lichtenstein suggests we read Eov on Tisha B'Av. If you want to study something on Tisha B'Av, what can you study? You can't study Talmud. You can't study regular stuff. You know what you can study? You can study Eov, Job. Why Job? Job was an individual. It's nothing to do with the temple. So you could say if people want to talk about theological problems, why is there evil in the world? Okay, that's one answer. Rabbi Moshe Soloveitchik says, do you know why we want to read about Eov? Because Eov was a person who no one could console him. And the worst part about a Shiva is if there's no consolation. If it's a Zoom Shiva, that's the worst. Because there's no consolers. You live for Robinson Crusoe, he's trying to sit Shiva, it's not Shiva. So when do we do the Nechama? We do it afterwards, not 7 days, but 7 weeks, 7 Shabbosos after Tisha B'Av. We have 7 Haftorahs of consolation. We focus on the notion of consolation in Haftorah. The theme of those Shabbosos is consolation. The theme of Shabbos Nachamu is Nechama, consolation. Even that has a sequence, because I believe it's Sipsikta, one of the Midrashim explains that the 7 haftorahs, the first words of the 7 haftorahs, form a conversation. What's the conversation? Conversation goes like this: Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. God says to the prophets, "Go give my people comfort." So, what does Zion say? Zion says, "Vatomer Tzion azavani Hashem, Hashem shlichai." Zion says, "I'm not going to be comforted. God has forgotten me." So we say, "No. Rani akara lo yolata. You should be rejoiced." No. So then he says, "All right, I'll tell you what. Anochi u'nachemchem. I will comfort you. Oh, I'll comfort you directly, not the prophets. God Himself will comfort you." So the people say, "Oh, in that case, fine." So Sasish Hashem, the last Haftorah begins with the words, "I will rejoice." Zion says, "Fine, I will rejoice with God." It starts off by saying, "Azavani Hashem," right? And I will not be comforted. And finally, it ends by saying, "I will rejoice with God, because God will adorn me with all kinds of great things in the end of days." So even the Shev and Nechemta, the Nechama, is like the Shiva. So when your best friend walks on the first day and he says, "Don't feel so bad, don't worry, everything will be okay." Say, "You idiot, get away, I don't want to talk to you." Next day, he lets you in, he talks a little bit. And by the 7th day, you say to him, "Well, thanks for coming. You really did make me feel better. I'm sorry I insulted you the first day." And so that's the Shev and Nechemta. There's a progression to that as well. We're getting away from Tisha B'Av to the 7 of Nechemta. Also, there's a theory, it's mentioned in different Hasidic literature, that at the end of days, we know from the prophet Zechariah, you don't need the Hasidim for this, that Tisha B'Av will become a great sasson l'simcha. It'll be a great time of great joy. So it'll be a holiday. Most holidays, you have the beginning of the holiday, and then 7 days later, you finish off at the end of the holiday. What's 7 days later? 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. The 15th day is Tu B'Av. You know what Tu B'Av is? It's the happiest day of the calendar. Tu B'Av is when there are 5 to 7 different theories in the Talmud what Tu B'Av is, the end of Tainus. But certainly it's a time of merry matchmaking and festivities and boys and girls finding their bashert and all that. It's a very exciting time. So this Hasidic writers say, I don't forget where they got it from, that there's a progression. Tisha B'Av will be the beginning of the Yontif of the redemption of Mashiach, and the last day of Yontif will be Tu B'Av. So there'll be a new holiday, 7-day holiday. It'll start with Tisha B'Av, end on Tu B'Av, which is one of the happiest holidays anyway. And so we go from the morning to Tu B'Av, one of the happiest days of the year. Nowadays we don't really do much with it, but in theory, it's supposed to be in the end of days. It will be one of the happiest days. And then what happens next? What's the end of the cycle? Back to the year round. Then you go back to baseline to the basic mourning. You leave a space in your house that's not plastered. Again, whether we do that today or not, interesting question. You sing a song for Jerusalem. You break a glass at a wedding. Some people put ashes on the head of the chassan at the wedding. You do what you can to remember Jerusalem in small ways. We don't want to ruin our whole lives. Rabbis realized, Jeremiah, everyone realized that you have to build homes, you have to get married, you have to go, you have to do. But you can't just sit around and mope for the last 2,000 years. But we have a baseline of mourning that always continues a year round. So we've shown that there is a year cycle for mourning because there's stuff we do all the time. And then the 4 fasts keeps our consciousness about the temple all the time. And then we sort of get ourselves all worked up during the summer. We build it up from the 3 weeks, 9 days, to Erev Tisha B'Av, which is very severe. Tisha B'Av, which is a little bit less severe. The night of Tisha B'Av is worse. The day is a little better. The afternoon is even better. Then we go back to a little more mourning after Tisha B'Av till the next day. And then we start, some suggest that we should continue mourning for a week or a month, but we don't. And what we do participate in is we have 7 weeks of consolation for the next 7 weeks. Beautiful haftorahs. It's really, really great. And perhaps Tu B'Av is the culmination of the joy that will be one day after Tisha B'Av. It'll be the joy will go on after Tisha B'Av, from Tisha B'Av till 7 days later on Tu B'Av. And then we do have Tu B'Av today. It's supposed to be a little more of a joyous day. And then we go back to our year-round mourning, a low-level, low-grade mourning, so we should be able to function. It's like, God forbid someone loses a relative. So you say, okay, that's it, the year's over. No. Every year you can have a yurtzeit. You have to yizkur, certain things you don't put the deceased loved one out of sight and out of mind completely. You do have a baseline of respect and memory of the loved one, for the person you're mourning for, but it's not as severe anymore. It can be more lenient. So that's our discussion of the stages of mourning. And that concludes the formal part of our discussion. Thank you for joining us.